I have this fascination with documentaries, especially true crime documentaries. And some of the ones I watch are they're horrific. The Ted Bundy tapes, Evil Genius on Netflix was one of my favourite ones. And I got a message on Facebook that basically told me that I should watch one called Abducted in Plain Sight. And it's not the usual type of crime documentary. It's on a whole nother level, and it happened in 1974. And I would suggest seeing it before watching this, because we're going to discuss a couple of things. I will say there is a trigger warning because it deals with pedophilia and sexual abuse. But this was a really fascinating look into the minds of parents in the 70s. A lot of people are judging the mum and dad about just how naive and stupid they were to let these things happen. I mean, I agree. There's a part of me that just goes, I don't understand. I'm not a parent. I don't have children. So I can't judge these things. And I know being a parent is very hard work. You run down, you're tired, you try to do the best for your kids. So I feel like my opinions on this are completely invalid because I've never experienced that. In a nutshell, what happened was in 1974, you had this sort of Bible Belt family. They were religious, who had a neighbour who basically groomed mum, dad, and their 12-year-old daughter Jan, and he manipulated them into letting him take their daughter and basically sexually abusing her and tricking her into believing this story about an alien abduction and how she wasn't allowed to talk about the abuse because he basically manipulated a 12-year-old and put so much fear into her and that she never spoke about what happened. It's so much more complicated than that, so that's why you need to watch this before maybe listening to what I have to say. And here are my thoughts. The first thing that just sort of made me go, what is happening, was when the mother was recounting her love affair with B. And she just changed. Her demeanour changed. And she you could see her smiling. You could see her reliving that experience in her head. And just, she looked like she was still in love with that man. And she had such an amazing time with him that I was shocked. And that was because I think back then in 1974, 1976, she didn't know what he was doing to her daughter. And now in this documentary, she knew the whole story, and she still had this element of reliving that memory in her head and still feeling that same amount of enjoyment and passion, even knowing what he did to her daughter. Now, I could be completely wrong, but that was just the vibe I got from her. And I don't ever want to think people are bad parents, but I think these parents just made the wrong decisions. They were, so focused on, this is, again, opinion, on their religious beliefs and their social standing in the community, that they didn't want their sort of infidelities made public. They just wanted to be seen as a wholesome family that was absolutely fine. That's how B obviously managed to manipulate them into letting him do what he did. But the situation with the father as well was interesting. Is he closeted homosexual, maybe? Because I just don't know. I don't know what person does what he did. Like, I don't. But again, you're not part of the situation back in the 70s. It's so easy for us to judge now in 2019 when we've got all this information. The internet has provided us with so many tips and clues and so many stories about pedophilia and what an abductor is like, what a manipulator does. So we're hyper aware of the things that these people do. So we know in these situations we would never, ever let these things happen. But in 1974, I'm sort of making excuses for them, but I don't think they realised what this man was doing. I don't think they realised he was a predator, and they were very naive. I just want to believe the best in people, and I want to just give them all the opportunities. But then the initial abduction happens. She's led to believe that this alien race needs, a child to happen, and the abuse happens, and then they don't call the police, and they wait a bit, and then as a parent today, if your kid, you couldn't find your kid in a shopping centre, you'd call the FBI, and immediately you want your kid found. You freak out as a parent. But they just didn't. They were worried for her, but I mean, they waited so long before they called the police because of B's wife. It was like, oh no, don't call the police. Oh, they'll be home soon. It's okay. Yeah. Anyway, so you offer these sort of allowances to the parents for the first abduction. And you think, okay, they're worried, but they've never gone through this, so they think they're overreacting, so they're like, no, we don't need to waste people's time. No. Then they get their daughter, and the FBI end up getting involved, and the FBI say, shut down any connections with this man and his family, never talk to him again. And they go right back, and the same thing happens again. And that's when I'm like, there's sort of no excuse for it. How can you willingly let your daughter go to this man? Because Jane was in love with him, but she was 12, 13. Oh, it's just such a hard situation because I don't want to get angry at the parents for how dumb they were, but they were really dumb. And they really needed to parent that child and be like, you need to sit down. You are absolutely not seeing that man. I don't care if you run away or whatever you do, you are not going to see that man. But they let her get on a plane and then they didn't see her for months. He put her in a boarding school. He pretended that he was part of the CIA and that people were going to come and look for her, but you needed to tell these people that they weren't there. He manipulated so many people. During the documentary, obviously, they talked to B's brother, who didn't seem... He was very casual about the whole thing. And he almost knew that that relationship was bad, but just let it happen. And again, is that a product of the 70s and the lack of information? And in 2019, we're so hyper aware of everything that we see something that we don't like. People have called... This is how bad it is in 2019. If you're a father and you take your kid to a park and you're taking photos of them, the cops have been called because there's a strange man taking photos of children. We're so overprotective and just that we'll call the cops on anything. Whereas maybe in the 70s, because they didn't know about this, oh man, it's so hard because I constantly want to justify their rationale of their decisions. And I can't. And then the therapy. The fact that he was like, oh, for my therapy, I need to sleep with your daughter. And that went on for 3 months. He slept in the same bed as a 13-year-old girl. And the parent, for 3 months that went on. And the parents just let it happen. I think to myself, why would you let people hear your story? What part of your story... I just don't understand the logic in sharing this story because it's just the worst decisions any parent could ever make. And you're opening this story up for everyone. And I'm talking none of the comments I got were sympathetic to the parents, which I just feel awful because they've really up, like massively. And Jan's doing her pieces to camera and she sort of accepts the decisions her parents made, and whether that's because she loves them so dearly and she doesn't want to see them hurt anymore and she still thinks this is her fault, and you just feel awful for her because now with all the the feedback that this documentary has gotten, she has to realise that her parents they failed her. They completely just failed her. Eileen says, I think a lot of people seem to miss that he groomed her and the parents. They let him control them because he tapped into their weaknesses and fears and exploited them. It's terrifying how manipulative people can be. Chris says, I think their faith had a lot to do with everything that transpired, and I absolutely agree with that. And I felt like that was not touched at all. They went to church every Sunday. They never really spoke about their faith, but I think that they were just so concerned about their faith and how the church would perceive what they did. with this man and not forgive them, and then they'd be outcast, and so they wanted to keep all these secrets. So in order to keep these secrets, they let their daughter go with a 40-year-old man. And then in the end, the father wanted a divorce, and they came to the conclusion that they didn't want a divorce. And that whole part of the documentary, he said, was the lowest point for him. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, what about finding out your daughter had been, raped like 40, 50 times? Or was it was hundreds of times? And the fact that, here's the thing that really, really blew my mind. No one took her to therapy. No one sat her down and said to her, what has he done to you? He's a liar and a manipulator. No one did that. They said, whatever he said to you is a lie. It's not true. Don't worry. You will not die. Like, talking to someone that's clearly shut themselves off and pushing themselves away. And not once did they think that maybe that therapy should be involved, or a professional should sit her down and say, you've been heavily manipulated, and try to work out the story that's been fed to her. She's home, and life carries on like nothing has happened. Anyway, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Oh my God, all these people, all these opportunities to shut this down, and no one took any. Jan had to do it herself. When she turned 16, she realised it was all a lie. She physically had to close down everything herself. She was the one that solved the crime. And obviously, hindsight is a wonderful thing. And you can look back and assess all these things in hindsight. But unless you're in that exact moment, you can't really explain a situation. And again, the year 74 to 2019, it's so many years has passed, and so many things have happened where we've learnt behaviours and what's right and what's wrong. And